In biochemistry, scientists categorize the chemicals important to living things. They classify compounds as organic or inorganic. You may have heard of the term organic before. It is often used to describe food that is farmed without pesticides and or chemical fertilizers. Organic means something totally different in biochemistry. Organic compounds are compounds that contain carbon and hydrogen. Organic compounds can and often do contain other atoms as well. Many organic compounds contain oxygen and or nitrogen. Organic compounds are vital to living things. They build structures in organisms, perform important functions in organisms, and provide energy. Organic compounds are usually nonpolar. They are formed by covalent bonds between carbon and other atoms. Carbon has 4 valence electrons that can form 4 strong covalent bonds. Many organic compounds consist of long chains of carbon atoms. Carbon is able to bond with other carbon atoms to form endless varieties of carbon chains. In fact, there are millions of organic compounds. There are 4 classes of organic compounds that are important to living things. These are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbohydrates are also called sugars and are a major source of energy. Lipids are also called fats and are the energy storing molecules. Nucleic acids are important to storing and passing on genetic information. Proteins are important to chemical reactions and building structure in living things. We'll be learning more about these compounds in this lesson. Inorganic compounds, however, are chemicals that are not organic. Inorganic means that it does not contain both carbon and hydrogen. An inorganic compound can contain either carbon or hydrogen, but not both. Some inorganic compounds do not contain either carbon or hydrogen. For example, table salt is made of sodium and chlorine. Oxygen is made of oxygen atoms. These substances are inorganic. Inorganic compounds are usually polar. They form by polar covalent bonds or by ionic bonds. This means inorganic compounds usually dissolve in water, since water is a polar compound. Unlike organic compounds, many inorganic compounds are very small. Furthermore, there are fewer inorganic compounds compared to the number of organic compounds. There are only about tens of thousands of inorganic compounds. Inorganic compounds are very important to living things also. Organisms cannot live without carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water. These substances are all inorganic. Inorganic compounds are sometimes used in chemical reactions. Water and carbon dioxide are used to make food for plants. Oxygen helps animals break down sugar and produce energy. Inorganic compounds also form many of the minerals, rocks, and metals that are found on Earth. Inorganic compounds can also be found in water. Salts are inorganic compounds as well, and salts play a very important role in maintaining proper water balance in animals, including in humans. Carbohydrates are a type of organic compound that are commonly known as sugars. Carbohydrates are a major source of energy for all living things. They build structure in plants, fungi, and some animals also. Carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Most carbohydrates are in the shape of a pentagon or a hexagon ring. A strand of carbon atoms is linked together by an oxygen atom to form the ring. A single ring is considered one carbohydrate molecule. Many carbohydrates do exist as single carbohydrate molecules. These carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. Mono means one and saccharide means sugar. These sugars are called the simple sugars. The most important monosaccharide is glucose. Glucose is made of 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. We write the chemical formula of glucose as C6H12O6. Fructose is another example of a monosaccharide. Galactose is also a monosaccharide. Two monosaccharides attached together by an oxygen atom. These carbohydrates are called disaccharides. Di means two. Sucrose, also known as table sugar, is one example of a disaccharide. It is made of a glucose and a fructose bonded together by an oxygen atom. Lactose, which is the sugar found in milks, is also a disaccharide. Lactose is made of the monosaccharides glucose and galactose. Some carbohydrates are made of 3 or more monosaccharides that are linked together. These carbohydrates are called polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are the complex sugars. Glycogen, starch, and cellulose are examples of polysaccharides. These polysaccharides are all made of glucose molecules linked together. Glycogen is a storage form of glucose that is found in animals. Plants also produce a storage form of glucose called starch. Cellulose is a polysaccharide that makes up plant cell walls. Cellulose provides structure and support to plants. Insects, crustaceans, and fungi produce a polysaccharide that is very similar to starch. It is called chitin. Chitin provides structure and support as well. Fungi's cell walls are made of chitin. Insects, crustaceans, and mollusks produce an exoskeleton that is made of chitin to protect them. So how is the structure and bonding similar and different in the polysaccharides? Well, starch, cellulose, and glycogen are all made from glucose. In the polysaccharides, glucose molecules are linked together by single covalent bonds. Starch has one type of bond that links the glucose molecules together to form a long chain. Cellulose has alternating types of bonds that form a long chain, and glycogen has one type of bond, but it forms branches. Humans do not have an enzyme capable of breaking the bonds of cellulose, but we do have an enzyme capable of breaking the bonds of starch, so that the glucose molecules can then be used for energy. Lipids are another class of organic molecules. They include fats, phospholipids, sterols, and waxes and oils. Lipids have very important functions. They store energy, make up cell membranes, and play a role in cell signaling and communication. Lipids are very large. They are hydrophobic, meaning that they're water-fearing, or they're amphiphilic, which means that a molecule is both hydrophobic and hydrophilic, or water-fearing and water-loving. This happens when lipid molecules are so large that one end is polar and the other end isn't. The polar end is hydrophilic or water-loving and is attracted to water. The nonpolar end is hydrophobic and is repelled by water. Many people think all lipids are fats. Fats are actually one type of liquid. They are solid at room temperature. Fat is an energy store in animals. Fat molecules are stored in cells that form fat tissue. Fat tissue is also called adipose tissue. When an animal needs energy, it breaks down fat molecules located in adipose tissue. Adipose tissue also provides protection for internal organs, and it helps in maintaining body temperature. Fat can also be called the triglyceride. Triglycerides are made of 3 long chains attached to a small molecule called a glycerol. The 3 chains are known as fatty acids. A fatty acid is a hydrocarbon with an acidic functional group attached to it. There are two different types of fat. Saturated fat is a triglyceride that's made of fatty acids that contain only single covalent bonds. In other words, all of the bonds of carbon have two or more hydrogens attached to them to form the four bonds that carbon needs. Unsaturated fat is a triglyceride made with fatty acids that contain one or more double covalent bonds. One or more of the hydrogens are missing and a double covalent bond forms in its place. The double covalent bond causes the fatty acid chain to have some sort of kink in it. There are different kinds of unsaturated fats. Monounsaturated fats contain one double bond. Polyunsaturated fats contain two or more bonds. Saturated fats are what we consider the unhealthy fats, whereas unsaturated fats are a little more healthy. You may have heard of trans fat. Trans fat is a type of unsaturated fat. However, trans fat is different from other unsaturated fats. The double bonds in trans fat alter the shape of the fat molecule differently than other unsaturated fats. In its different shape, it gives it a different function. Trans fats increase level of fat and cholesterol in the bloodstream. Cell membranes are made of lipids called phospholipids. A phospholipid molecule is made of two fatty acids that is attached to a glycerol residue and a phosphate group. The fatty acid tails are nonpolar or hydrophobic, which means that they do not like water. The phosphate group at the head is polar, and this means that it is hydrophilic or likes water. Phospholipids form two layers around a cell. That is why we call the membrane a phospholipid bilayer. The polar heads face both inside and outside the cell, and the polar tails are within the membrane. The cell membrane is what allows certain substances inside the cell, and it keeps other substances outside of the cell. Cholesterol is a sterol. Sterols are types of lipids. Cholesterol is the most important sterol in living things. We can find cholesterol in our foods, but animals can also synthesize cholesterol in their cells, and so it's not necessary to consume it in food. You may have heard only bad things about cholesterol. Well, too much cholesterol in the body can cause diseases. However, cholesterol has very important functions and you could not live without it. Cholesterol is important in building and maintaining cell membranes. It keeps the cell membranes fluid, helps with cell communication, and transports substances into and out of cells. Cholesterol is also important to nerve cells. Cholesterol forms a protective sheath around nerve cells called myelin. In humans, cholesterol also helps synthesize substances needed by the body. Cholesterol is used to make bile. Bile helps with the digestion of fats. Cholesterol is also used to make the steroid hormones. Steroid hormones are steroids that act as hormones. Estrogen and testosterone are examples of steroid hormones. Steroid hormones help control metabolism, immune functions, and sexual characteristics. Also, cholesterol is used to synthesize vitamin D. Vitamin D helps the body absorb calcium and other minerals. The last type of lipids are waxes and fats. Animals and plants both make waxes. Waxes are plastic-like at room temperature. Plants produce wax to coat the surface of their leaves. This helps the leaves retain water. Bees produce wax to build honeycombs. Both plants and animals make oils as well. Oils are liquid at room temperature, and they are composed of triglycerides. Oils are produced in skin glands to protect them against germs and to moisturize the skin. Oils produced by plants act as energy stores. Humans can also use plant oils for cooking. Proteins are the third type of organic compounds. They have a wide variety of functions in living things. The most important role is to catalyze chemical reactions. Proteins that catalyze chemical reactions are called enzymes. They can also help to replicate DNA, transport substances within cells and throughout the organism, and help an organism respond to stimuli. Furthermore, proteins build structures in animals and plants, such as hair, nails, and muscles. They are also important to immune function. Proteins are made of one or more chains of amino acids. Amino acids are very small molecules, and there are about 20 different kinds of amino acids. Each amino acid is made up of a carbon bonded to a hydrogen, which forms an acid group, an amine group, which contains nitrogen, and an R group. The R group is called the side group. Each of the 20 amino acids contain a different R group. The R group is what defines the amino acid. The function of a protein completely relies on its structure. If the structure of a protein is altered, then the protein will not work properly. Faulty proteins cause many diseases. A faulty protein will result when an amino acid sequence is changed or it's incorrect. When the amino acid sequence changes, the shape of the protein will also change. When the shape changes, then the protein does not work, because remember, the function of a protein completely relies on its structure, and if the structure is altered, the protein will not work properly. Environmental factors can also change the shape of a protein. This is called denaturization. When a protein's shape is changed because of the environment, we say it is denatured. Temperature and pH can alter the shape of a protein. Most proteins work best at a neutral pH and near normal body temperature. When the pH or the temperature changes, the shape of the protein will also change. This causes the protein to not work properly. Fortunately, many proteins will revert to their proper shape if conditions are restored, however. If the pH changes drastically or the temperature changes dramatically, the protein can be permanently altered. Proteins have a very complex and unique structure. We study the structure of a protein in a progressive four-step fashion. Proteins in the primary structure, proteins are composed of long chains of amino acids. Every protein has a different order of the 20 amino acids. The sequence of amino acids forms the primary structure of a protein. In the secondary structure, because amino acids can form hydrogen bonds within the protein, this will cause the protein to fold or to form pleated sheets or helices. We call these beta sheets or alpha helixes. The hydrogen bonds that form between the amino acids forms the secondary structure of a protein. The tertiary structure occurs because some amino acids are polar and others are not. Some amino acids are also small and others are very large. The characteristics of amino acids cause the protein chain to fold and bend in certain ways. These interactions between amino acids give a protein its specific shape. The specific shape of a protein is referred to as the tertiary structure of a protein. The quaternary structure is because proteins are actually made of more than one chain of amino acids. Sometimes two or more amino acids will interact to form a protein complex. Hemoglobin is an example of a protein complex. The structure formed by many or multiple amino acid chains is the quaternary structure. Nucleic acids are large organic molecules. They are essential to all living things. They are involved in storing, transmitting, and expressing genetic information in an organism. Genetic information is what codes or gives the traits that each organism has. There are two types of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. Both RNA and DNA are made of subunits called nucleotides. A nucleotide has three different basic parts: the nitrogenous base, the sugar, and the phosphate. DNA is a very large molecule. It carries instructions that code for development, function, and structure of an organism. It is passed on from one generation to the next in all living things. Every DNA nucleotide contains a deoxyribose sugar and a phosphate group. The base can change in the nucleotide. There are 4 different nitrogenous bases in DNA. Adenine always pairs up with thymine, and cytosine always pairs up with guanine. DNA is a double-stranded helix. It looks much like a twisted ladder or spiral staircase. The DNA double helix has 2 strands or sides. The strands are connected to rungs, the sides of the ladder of alternating sugar and phosphate group molecules. The rungs are the pairs of nitrogenous bases. The nitrogenous bases pair together using hydrogen bonds. RNA performs many different functions, encoding, regulating, and expressing traits carried in DNA. It also helps to synthesize or make proteins. There are 3 main types of RNA: messenger RNA, ribosomal RNA, and transfer RNA. All 3 types of RNA either help directly or indirectly in expressing the traits carried by DNA. RNA is smaller than DNA. It is only single-stranded chain of nucleotides. Every RNA nucleotide contains a ribose sugar and a phosphate group. Like DNA, the bases can change. There are 4 nitrogenous bases in RNA. Adenine pairs up with uracil, and cytosine pairs up with guanine.